In this abode may we find comfort and courage. Here may our sight become vision to the unseen, to glimpse the good that is yet to be. And I can't take credit for that. That's by Marianne Houghton Carter. Whether you are a member, guest, or curious first timer, welcome to Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. Since 1967, we've been a warm and welcoming community right here in Pottstown. Our founders poured their hearts, their resources, and their talents into creating this special place, and together we carry their inspiring legacy. In their spirit, we continue their mission of nurturing spiritual journeys, embracing diversity, celebrating community, and turning values into action. If this is your first time here or your 101st time, we're glad you were here. This community is what it is because of your presence. Welcome into this space of love, support, justice, compassion, fellowship, and worship. We are glad you're here. Well, now's the time to share what's coming up, what help you might need, what's new in our fellowship, etc. So while we're waiting for our announcers to line up, I'd like to take just a minute to thank Justine for running our technology together, and Cecilia Trainer, who's on the piano for us today, and Kelly Young on the violin. They will help us lift up our hearts in song. All right, announcements. Of course you have announcements.
Of course, it's me. Well, this will be maybe the last time I have announcements because I'm not going to be president anymore after today. Is this on? Hello? Okay, cool. So today is the big day. It's our congregational meeting for the year. Yay! So we're gonna start at 11:45 afterwards, and we're gonna go through some topics, and then we're gonna get into voting. So please, if you're a member, please stay. If you are not a member, you can hang out, but please kind of stick to the back because we have to do votes today. So, do you have any questions? All right, cool. Thank you.
Morning, my name's Chad. As you know, just Irene and I have founded the Uplifting Voices Project. Yesterday, we did a writers' market here on the grounds, and it was a really good learning experience. We had 45 vendors, 45 writers. To your point about what you just said about community and diversity, and checked all those boxes. It was really great. We had a ton of very varied writers here. With the vendors and their families and the foot traffic, even though we got hit with a crazy thunderstorm at around 2 o'clock, that kind of messed things up. But we had like 150 people come to the grounds yesterday. So 2 of the writers were from UU Reading, which was really cool to meet them and kind of see what their world's like. One of the attendees was a retired UU minister. We had a good opportunity kind of like chat everybody up about what goes on here and how our founder, we were right out there in the yard. So I was saying, see the outline of the building? That's like the original founders that built this building. It's really cool. So it was a success. Thank you to anybody who shared anything or liked anything on social media or flyers of the libraries or attended. It was a really, really good event. And I just appreciate the opportunity and thanks for the support.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you, Chad, for helping yesterday, and thank you for everyone who was here for the event. It was a great success, and we're looking to do more. But we do have another event that Monica and I have signed up and will be attending. It is next Saturday. It is Pottstown Pride Fest. It'll be next Saturday from 1 to 5 at Schenkel UCC, United Church of Christ. They are a welcoming congregation. If anyone would like to join us, the more the merrier. We'd love to have you there. It is again next Saturday from 1 to 5. So hope to see you there. Thanks.
Morning, everybody. I'm Clifford. I'm officially the kitchen manager here. And a couple of weeks ago, the county health inspector inspected our kitchen And not only did we just pass with flying colors, she had not even one single complaint. It's good stuff. I got in there for a couple of days and scrubbed the place.
Thank you, everybody. All right, and speaking of thanks, I would like to thank Judith for volunteering to light our challenge the rest of the day. Now, lead a prayer that came from Reverend Joe Green. You may remember that last fall, and I think in January, she led our service via Zoom. So what she said is, our different paths come together in this holy place, graced by the history of our free religious heritage. Let us be mindful of the forces deep within that call us to become more than we are. May this hour bring rest and renewal, comfort and challenge. May we be reminded of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but that we are connected in mystery and in wonder to each other, to this community, and to the universe. Now, before I tap our chime, I'd like to ask everyone to put your phone in worship mode. The chime, as you know, allows us to come into the present and focus on the gift that is the present moment. So, ready? All right. In the opening, I have 3 quotes to share. I couldn't decide which one I like best, so they're all short, and I'll read them all to you. Leo, and I've never known how to pronounce his name correctly, so I'm just going to say it, Leo Biscaglia. I think you know who I mean. I know for certain that we never lose the people we love, even to death. They continue to participate in every act, thought, and decision that we make. Their love leaves an indelible imprint in our memories. We find comfort in knowing that our lives have been enriched by having shared their love. Bruce Colville tells us, nothing you love is lost. Not really. Things, people, they always go away sooner or later. You can't hold them any more than you could hold moonlight. But if they've touched you, if they're inside you, then they're still yours. The only things you ever really have are the ones you hold inside your heart. And my favorite poet, Maya Angelou, says, a great soul serves everyone all the time. A great soul never dies. It brings us together again. So talking about souls, let us stand in body, mind, or spirit and open to number 123 in the gray hymnal, Spirit of Life.
Sing
Now it's time for a story of all ages. Now, we're very important. Just anybody who wants to come up, I'll be on as a star today. All right. We're very fortunate to have leaders in medical research who develop methods and medications to help us live longer and have quality of life. Some of these names are familiar. Clara Barton, Elizabeth Blackwell, Jonas Salk, Henry Heimlich, is repeated, Anthony Fauci, and Mae Jameson, our astronaut doctor, to name just a few. But we're going to hear about Florence Nightingale right now. Liana will share some aspects of Florence's life and a few things that might be new about you. So, and I also have, or will have, two helpers to show some pictures. Please.
Hello, my name is Florence. I'll tell you about my life that started on May 12, 1820, in a beautiful city in Italy named Florence, which is how I got my name. My family was wealthy and we lived in big, comfortable houses in England. But even as a girl, I felt strong, full of calling from God to do something important, to help people who were suffering. In those days, girls like me were expected to marry and run a household. I wanted to be a nurse. My parents were horrified. Nursing was not considered a respectable job back then, but I couldn't ignore the voice in my heart. So I studied hard in secret, learning all I could about medicine and caring for the sick. My big chance to help came in 1854 during the Caribbean War. My friends, a powerful man named Cindy Herbert, asked me to lead a group of nurses to a military hospital in a place called Scutari. When we arrived, the hospital was dirty, crowded, and smelled terrible. More soldiers were dying from diseases than from their wounds in battle. I know I had to act. I got down on my hands and knees and scrubbed the floors. My team and I organized the hospital, made sure the soldiers had clean bandages and good food, and opened the windows to let in fresh air at night. When everyone else was asleep, I walked through the dog hollows with my little red, checking on each soldier to make sure they were comfortable. We started calling the lady with the lamp. It always made me smile to know they felt cared for. When I returned to England, I was famous, but my work wasn't finished. I had seen so much unnecessary suffering that I was determined to stop it from happening again. I was very good with numbers and collected a lot of information, which we call data. I used this data to create charts and graphs to show the government and even Queen Victoria just how many soldiers were dying from poor conditions. My reports were so convincing that they made huge chances to improve the health of the army. I also wrote a book called Notes on Nursing and used the money people gave me to open the Nightingale Training School for nurses in 1860. I wanted nursing to be a respected profession for smart, dedicated women. I spent the rest of my long life working to make hospitals safer and cleaner for everyone, even though I was often sick myself and I had to work for my bed. I wrote thousands of letters and reports. My little lamp in the dark hospitals became a symbol of hope and kindness. And it showed that one person with determination and knowledge can make a huge difference. I hope my story shows you that if you have a passion to help others, you should follow it. You never know how many lives you might put out.
So here's the Florence. Here's the lady with the lamp. Florence. Yes.
I graduated as a nurse back in 1983. Part of the panty ceremony was we shot a leg in the panel that he was live. So it was really a lot of fun. They still do it. They were doing it in the 70s. For race and privilege. It was part of the ceremony. So and I still have my little song.
Do you?
Yes.
You too. About a chalice. Yeah, it's wonderful. I never knew that. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, the children are all gone, but let's. Right, let's sing the mat. I just got some tissues out because I'm going to share a personal story, and I hope I can make it through. 2 Sundays ago, my sister-in-law Karen died. She was the widow of my brother Phil, who died in 2003, the day after the Columbia shuttle. That's how I remember. He was 58, and he was doing kind of like a class, a NASCAR class where you learn a little bit and then you go out and drive. He always liked driving fast. So he died, he had a heart attack. He died doing what he loved. You know, I can tell you about him some other time, but so Karen, her home was in the Annapolis area. She had a 3-story townhouse. And she lived alone. She was 83. She told her 2 daughters, Kimmy and Mary Jo, I do not want to move out of this house. And she had knee replacement, hip replacement, had to go up and down these stairs. But anyway, about 2 months ago, she had a stroke. And she fell on the stairs. She was there for 4 days by herself. And of course, her phone was dead, or maybe she didn't even have it with her. But a friend hadn't heard from her, and she had a key to the house, and she came in and took her to the hospital. As you might imagine, Karen had a huge sore from where she, was sitting, and she was in a lot of pain. So her daughters moved her to a facility in Wayne, closer to my one niece, and the other one flew in from California, definitely. But Karen put on a brave face for them. She was just that kind of person, but they could tell that she was in a great deal of pain. And the girls talked to her about hospice, but she kept saying no because she was, putting on a brave face. The staff told the girls that, and I call them the girls, Mary Jo's going to be 60 on Labor Day, and which I think is ironic, and Kimmy is about 18 months younger, Irish twins. Anyway, the staff said that she did want hospice, but that, and she was in a great deal of pain, despite, increasing dosages of pain meds. But they said that Karen would have to be the one to say that to the girls. She goes, no, I don't want hospice. But then she finally did. And she began palliative care the week before she died. When you go on palliative, nobody knows how long you'll be with us. But She wasn't necessarily a baseball fan, but the way that I think about her death, she kind of like slid into her heavenly home base early that Sunday morning. Now, I'm sharing her story with you for two reasons. First, the staff did the exact right ethical thing by telling the girls that they had to hear it from Karen. They'd be angels of death otherwise, wouldn't they? And second, Karen has been in my life for 60 years. If Bill were still alive, they would have celebrated their 60th anniversary on November 6th. I'll miss her, but she will still be in my life. I'm sorry. Because she raised two of the strongest, most intelligent, and most compassionate women I have ever met. And I'm just so honored that they are my nieces and that she was my sister-in-law. So. All right, we are to the offertory. Giving is not about duty, it is an honor. Baskets up here. Thank you very much. This is an invitation to invest in the life of this community, to nurture its spirit and to carry its mission forward. We now receive the morning offering with open hands and open hearts. If you are here for the first time or the 100th time, the offering is just that. It's not a fee, it's not dues, it's whatever you want it to be. We're just glad that you're here with us. Right, it is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Cheryl Meinschein. Is that correct? Oh, good. I took 7 semesters of German in college. So got it right. She's a retired Lutheran pastor who is certified to teach high school biology and currently volunteers as a paralegal, helping people with criminal records apply for a governor's pardon. She's married to Richard and lives outside of Allentown. In her spare time, she enjoys reading a wide variety of books, traveling, and sewing. She has been speaking here quarterly since 2022 and always enjoys her visits. Cheryl, come on up. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. You'd think I'd been here enough that I wouldn't need the GPS to get here in the morning. And when I don't use it, I'm past the road. I come right down Route 100 and I just keep going. And this morning I got to St. Thomas More and I thought, no, this is why. So I reconnected the GPS, set it up because you're on my recent list. I turned around and came back. So I should just use it, give up. So my original plan was to handle this topic of physician-assisted suicide when I was here in May, but then I saw it was Mother's Day, and I thought, oh, no, I can't do that. So we got it today. So the plan for today is to do some talking about current questions being raised about physician-assisted or medically assisted suicide. But before we get there, I think it might be helpful to put in context with the concepts of death with dignity and the right to die. So I started out double checking some things about hospice, a practice which has pretty much gained widespread acceptance here over time. I'm sure you know this, but as a matter of definition, hospice is a type of healthcare that focuses on providing pain relief for terminally ill patients, attending to their emotional and spiritual needs at the end of life. It emphasizes comfort and quality of life by reducing pain and suffering rather than being focused on prolonging life-giving or life-sustaining measures. Hospice care was first established here in 1971, although it had been a practice in Europe much earlier than that. It wasn't long after hospice was established that the right to die cases started propping up in our courts here. The right to die movement in the United States began with the case of Karen Ann Quinlan, if you're old enough to remember that name, in 1975. Quinlan was 21. She had lost consciousness after combining drugs and alcohol at a party. She started to experience problems breathing and slipped into a coma in which a respirator and a feeding tube was used to keep her alive and breathing. When her parents understood that she was never going to wake up, her father went to court to remove the respirator that kept her alive. Eventually, the Quinlans won the court case. The respirator was removed in 1976, but Quinlan continued to live for 9 more years until 1985 when she died. Because she had no written documents or had never expressed to her family what she wanted done, the case had ended up in court, which had a significant influence on the effect of us having things like advance directives, saying what we want, proxies, and living wills. The next major case involved Terry Schiavo and took place in Florida between 1990 and 2005. She was a patient in what was called a persistent vegetative state, where she could breathe on her own, didn't need a ventilator or respirator, but was basically unconscious. And the case became controversial due to a disagreement between her husband and the rest of her family about whether or not to take her off the feeding tube, which would lead eventually to her dying. Now here's what blows my mind, and this is the part I had forgotten. The Schiavo case involved 14 appeals and numerous legal motions, petitions, and hearing in the Florida courts, 5 suits in federal district court, political intervention at the level of the Florida state legislature, including Governor Jeb Bush. Then it moved on to the US Congress, President George Bush, and 4 decisions from the Supreme Court about refusing to hear the case. The moral of the story is to have living wills or other documents establishing your end-of-life decisions, treatment decisions, because having the courts make the decision for you is not a helpful process, which is probably my understatement for the day. What these 2 cases had in common was to allow nature to take its course at the end of life. But in 1990, Dr. Jack Kevorkian, also known as Dr. Death, was involved in taking a more proactive role in ending life. In 1990, he performed his first medically assisted suicide, this time for an Alzheimer's patient in Michigan. And questions concerning the right to die and making those decisions have only gotten more complicated since then. At this point, some form of medically assisted death is now allowed in 12 countries, and more are likely to legitimize it soon. Right now, it is legal in Austria, Belgium, Canada, Germany, Luxembourg, most of Australia, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, and parts of the US. In the US, it is legal in 13 states, including New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, but not Pennsylvania yet, and in DC. One of the places where it's definitely gotten more attention is in Canada, where medically assisted suicide is federally regulated. In 2016, the Canadian Parliament passed the Medical Assistance in Dying Act, also known as MAID. And now 5% of all the deaths in Canada take advantage of, I guess you could say, of medical assistance. That's more deaths than from Alzheimer's and diabetes combined. While the practice was originally limited to those folks who were at the end of life where death was imminent, which is track 1, the practice has been expanded to include those with serious medical conditions, but who are not facing imminent death, which would be track 2. Those who seek MAID, as it's called, must have 2 clinicians sign off on their application. Those in track 1 have no waiting period before death can occur. Those in stage 2 have a waiting period of 90 days during which time their medical practitioner has to make sure that applicants give, quote, serious consideration to reasonable and available means to alleviate their suffering. It doesn't say they have to take them. It just says they have to consider them. Practitioners also have to be satisfied not only that a patient's suffering is enduring and intolerable, but is a function of a physical medical condition rather than mental illness, say, or financial instability. Given these complicated conditions and assessments, it's no wonder that many doctors and clinicians have chosen not to treat track 2 patients in cases where imminent death is not at hand. For many physicians and others, the moral struggle is real, some for religious reasons, and others because they believe that MAID violates a medical duty to do no harm. And for many, the situations are just too complicated. One doctor talked about a patient they saw who was in their 30s. That person had nerve damage that was so bad they couldn't go outside because even the feeling of a breeze or wind on their skin would be intolerable for them. They had seen every kind of specialist, they had tried non-traditional therapies, and there was no relief. Technically, this patient met every one of the criteria for MAID, but the physician just couldn't do it. Another physician was called in on the patient's behalf. Further complicating this procedure in Canada is the fact that in Canada, rather than primary care doctors working with patients to make decisions in track 2 cases, the system is largely developed around what's called MAID coordination centers, assembled in the more highly populated areas, complete with 1-800 numbers for referrals, which sounds, I must admit, kind of tacky to me. Given the lack of history between doctors and patients at these centers, the MAID assessment and making decisions is more difficult. In spite of the concerns mentioned above, there is some interest in Canada of broadening MAID even more to include those requesting it because of mental health issues, not primarily physical, but emotional. And that may start or may open up next year. They're also talking about it in terms of those younger than 18 with parental consent, or children who are very young who have conditions from which they will not recover. There are also those who have started drawing up advanced directives that include MAID provisions. And that's the category that's most intriguing to me and is drawing the most interest in Canada. Those who seem most interested in those possibilities of advanced directives are those who have witnessed loved ones dying of Alzheimer's or some other disease who don't want their loved ones to go through the same thing. Those individuals who want advanced directives written have conditions like, I want MAID initiated when, for example, I can no longer recognize my children, or when I become incontinent, or when it is no longer possible for me to live at home, and folks have come up with their own conditions. A common fear that I heard when I was working is that an individual does not want to be a burden, either financially or emotionally for that matter, or like a fear that I've often heard expressed. As a way of talking about where we are in the US, I looked over the Oregon Death with Dignity Act. Oregon was the first state to legalize medical assistance in death. That was in 1997, and it allowed terminally ill adult Oregonians to get prescriptions from their physicians for self-administered lethal doses of medication. Under the law, any competent adult who had been diagnosed by a physician with a terminal illness that would kill the patient within 6 months could ask the physician for a prescription for a lethal dose of medication that would end the patient's life. There had to be 2 witnesses to the request, and the diagnosis had to be confirmed by a second physician. The patient had to be determined to be free of a mental condition impairing their judgment, and if the request was authorized, the patient had to wait at least 15 days and make a second verbal request before the medication could be issued. The law protects doctors from liability for providing a lethal prescription for a terminally ill, competent adult. Participation by physicians, pharmacists, and healthcare providers is voluntary. It's not required. The law, and I thought this was interesting, the law also specifies that a patient's decision to end his or her life shall not have an effect upon a life, health, or accident insurance or annuity policy. Well, sure, you know, it used to be, I don't know if it still is, in life insurance policies, if you commit suicide, your family may not receive your insurance benefits. So just as a side note, the bill in Oregon, a similar bill has been introduced in Pennsylvania in the Senate, in April 25. It has been referred to the Judicial Committee and is sitting in committee awaiting action. So then I read the 2025 review of Oregon's patient characteristics, which was intriguing. Of the 400 deaths during 2025, 94% of the patients were white, 88% were age 65 or older with a median age of 76 years. Just over half were female and half had a bachelor's degree or higher. And I think you could, the whole question of fairness or equity in making this decision, I think is also something to think about. The patient's most common underlying illness was cancer, 61%, neurological disease, 14%, and heart disease, 11%. Most patients died at home, 80%, and 92% were enrolled in hospice care. As in previous years, the three most frequently reported end-of-life concerns were loss of autonomy, 89%. 89% also spoke about the decreasing ability to participate in activities that made life enjoyable, and 65% the loss of dignity. So for me, the question boils down to autonomy. Do I have the right to determine not only when my life ends, but the right to receive medical assistance in seeing that that takes place? Who, if anyone, gets to decide if my decisions or desire is appropriate? Is there a line that shouldn't be crossed? What's the line? And those are the questions we can talk about this morning. And just in case you're wondering, what do the Unitarians say about that? Do you know that the Unitarians say something about that? In 1988, a general resolution was passed that said Unitarian Universalists advocate the right to self-determination in dying and the release from criminal or civil penalties of those who, under proper safeguards, act to honor the right of terminally ill patients. Okay, so that limits it. Terminally ill patients to select the time of their own deaths. So there you go. What do you think? When should medically assisted death ever be offered? If so, in what cases? Where's the line? Where's not? What do you think? Has your thinking changed? And please, have you told those who you love what your decisions would be? So I have until 20th. What do you think? I've told my husband, if I'm not going to get better, you step on that oxygen line. And he says to me, "You're kidding, right?" I'm like, "No." Yeah.
Where as far as my greatest fear more than dying is dementia. And dementia patients can't make that decision in a fully informed and consenting way because it's affecting the way their brain works. And that's where it gets really great.
One of the examples in the article I read that was kind of scary was people who had advanced directives saying, when I get to the point where I'm no longer mentally competent, I want MAID. But so when the person is there, the doctor is trying to administer the medication and the patient doesn't remember. And so is traumatized by that. So
Yeah,
what?
I have a will that's like a medical will.
Just in case something
Ah.
on Zoom.
Sorry. I have a medical will and I was told, at least in Pennsylvania, I'm not allowed to put that in. Where if I reach a certain point of Alzheimer's, I would prefer to die. Or at least like have not be saved. No medical intervention and but I could appoint my sister as decision maker. And she's a doctor, so at least I was able to do that, but I was told if you have Alzheimer's or dementia, it's not you're SOL, at least now.
Other thoughts?
I don't really know how I feel about it. But I think for like people that are terminally ill, I think I'm okay with that. When you were mentioning like extending it to children, that like really like made me, ugh. Because I just like, I don't know, as a parent, like, even if, I mean, I know, I've never been in a situation, but like, you would do anything to give that life to your child, so it's just like, I could not, I don't know that I could. But I'm glad that I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm glad there's legislation and stuff about it, because it's not up to me to make that decision. So I think it's great that it's happening, and I support that legislation going forward, because I think it's good as a whole that people have options, so.
I found out within the past year that my godson's son, who's 10, has something I've never heard of called reverse Alzheimer's. That starting about age 10, he will start to regress to the point where he will die eventually. But I think about cases like that, or children who are born with severe medical problems. Boy, it's so hard, and I don't want, I can make the decision for myself, but I don't want to be making it for other people.
I think as you get older, you think of this a lot more. And I think most people that are older think, please do not let me linger and be kept alive against my will. And that's the thing, is that, you know, finding that place where you can say, okay, at this time, I want to be left go. Like, I think in hospice, isn't there like a fine line between palliative care and giving a little bit more towards the end? I don't know. But for me, I think if I were in hospice, I would think, let me go gently into the.
Yeah, I think the question is not only let me go, but help me go.
Yes.
That's the line.
So I have a number of thoughts on this. The first of which is, aren't we all terminal? None of us get out of this alive. And I think the greatest act of compassion that we can show another person is to allow them the choices regarding their journey and their life. So I am a believer in this. You talk about mental health, I looked it up, there's a great book, to get the title, In Love, a memoir of love and loss by Amy Bloom. And this is a woman who was married, her husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He was, the typical professor and all of this. And it's the story where he made the decision of he did not want to forget. He wanted to be able, he knew what was coming. And they actually could not find in the United States the ability to do dignity. So they went to Switzerland. There's a famous clinic, Dignitas. And it's a very interesting story. I've heard an interview with her. So if anybody is actually interested in that, it's certainly tearjerker. But it is interesting. And I think the final comment is I can remember as my mother was in final stages towards her death, and the hospice chaplain, she was in a skilled nursing facility, her breathing had started to, as breathing starts to do as you near death. And they're giving her morphine through all of this to help ease that. And the hospice chaplain was in, it was me, pocket, and the nurse comes in, she goes, I just wanted to see, how your mom was doing, if she needed more morphine. And I remember, and I'm looking at the chaplain, I'm looking at her going, do you know, I can walk into any veterinary clinic in the United States with a cat or dog in this condition, everybody would go, oh, we need to put this animal down, right? We need to treat it humanely. And I have just always struggled with, why do we not treat humans humanely? And I know where is that line, but it's just, I don't know. I often struggle with that. So.
I just want to piggyback on what she just said. My only experience with this, like I teach a secondary level and we do a debate seminar and this topic always comes up in debate seminar and I never really thought about it until like it touched my personal life. But my pap he watched 2 or 3 of his sisters go through Alzheimer's and dementia and pass away. And then he got diagnosed. He was much younger than them. And he 100% would have like opted for this. And I think the important thing to remember about something like Alzheimer's is like how long you can last. I mean, it was like 4 years of me and going and visiting him and having no idea who any of us were. And to your point, I would always say, like, if he was a golden retriever, he would be. And like, what are we doing this in service of? The insurance company, just to make sure they completely clean out their savings, you know, there's that like predatory aspect of it too, you know, but like, what was his quality of life when it looked like he was having a good time, but it was like he was meeting everybody for the first time every day. Not a bad space to be in.
I think the animals have this figured out. We had a cat, who was very old, about 4 years ago. And it was March, very cold. And the cat went out and laid down in the driveway. And we brought it in and like 3 days later, it wanted to go. I think animals know when it's their time and they wander off and disappear.
That's what I think.
My mother was diagnosed with dementia. She lasted 15 years.
Wow.
It went from forgetting things to blindness, deafness, incontinence, and she was 7 years of that. I was where people were turning her over to living in a bed. And there was nothing we could do about it here. We were in California, which is one of the most liberal places to live in the country. We're centuries behind what we. This he's totally right. The animals figured out. We have euthanasia that should be legal. If you're of any age, please get an attorney, have a trust, a will, and have all the directives taken care of. That's the most important thing. You do not want the government to have anything to do with your life or end of life, because they'll screw it up. That's it. Please just do that.
So as part of working in the mental health field and also being an interfaith minister, one of the jobs that I do have is working with several health systems where I'm on call to come in and administer end-of-life counseling, as well as some, as they call, last rites to individuals who are not of traditional spiritual beliefs. So it comes in flow. There are months where I'm called all the time. There's other months where I get a little respite. It is a very, very interesting work. I love it. It is also very heavy work. Some of the stuff that I see all the time is individuals pleading to leave and they are unable. So it brings tears to my eyes because, again, it is, to your point, the cat was pleading for it to go, right? And we were able to offer that to them. Individuals plead to go on their deathbed and they cannot. So I can pray with them, I can email as an interfaith minister and as a mental health professional, I can offer them counsel, but I cannot allow them to make that decision because of legalities in place. Now, some wealthy individuals do go ahead and actually transport their loved ones internationally where they are able to make that decision. And in those cases, when I do counseling after the fact, it is a lot more compassionate, a lot more graceful. But in most cases, individuals suffer because, especially if they have that consciousness about that decision and they're unable to fully make it, even though they wish to. It is very, very heartbreaking. I don't know what the answer is, but I know throughout our life we have choices and we have agency, and that is ongoing. However, at the time of death, we no longer seem to have it here. So these legislations are making big strides, but there's so much more that needs and can be done. Not even talking about a lot of families that I know that keep individuals alive for insurance purposes as well. So it is also an ongoing thing, and I had to report, I'm a mandatory reporter, and I had to report some of those families, unfortunately, to law enforcement because that is abuse. So again, system is broken as part of social justice perspective, as part of being Unitarian Universalist. I think we have a long road ahead, but a good big start is to have Reverend Cheryl here speaking to us about this today, bringing awareness, and for all of us to share our opinions and our experiences, so we can be a good voice for those whose agency and choices are being taken away at their end of life.
Thank you. I know you have a congregational meeting coming up, so go ahead, and we're done.
As a disabled person, and I think that we haven't touched on that right now. And there's so much in the world that is happening to disabled people, and they don't have a choice in it. And I think that they should have this choice, but I don't think anyone but the person should be able to make the choice. It's because when the government gets involved with things like that, it's never good.
Okay. Talk fast.
Just want to say that my mother died of a stroke when she was 86. And now my father, and she died at the end of July. Now in September, he got pneumonia and he ended up in the hospital with an oxygen mask on. And the nurses told me, he only stayed there overnight and he passed away, but the nurses told me that he kept pulling his oxygen mask off. So when I visited him, I tried to tell him, keep it on, but he was very strong-willed. And now thinking about it, I think he did the right thing by pulling off his oxygen mask because he wanted to be in charge. And he had nothing more to live for. And his quality of life was not good at all anymore. And he was almost 89 years old. So I think he did the right thing, thinking about it now.
Okay,
Thanks everybody for sharing.
It sounds like this is something you all may want to have another group to talk about somewhere down the line.
We can discuss it, social justice circle, second Sunday of each month, that's definitely social justice stuff.
And we should have you come back.
Yeah, just talking about having her come back, yes.
Yeah, give me a topic.
It's upside down. Okay, our closing hymn is Go Lift It Up, which is in bluish green teal. We always sound better with the choir, don't we? Right. We now enter a time of sharing our joys and sorrows. During this time, as you know, we turn the video cameras off. Would you like to extinguish the chalice? That's, thank you. We extinguish this flame, but not like this. Lighting lighting a candle is somewhat like the beginning of light. If that is true, then perhaps extinguishing a candle is like the end of life. But death may not be the end of us. We live on in the memories of friends and loved ones. The influence we possessed in life works on, moving persons or causes forward. Let us not forget that most candles have more than one light, and so perhaps may we. Blessed be. Cecilia, do you have a post-it? All right, so we'll stay and enjoy the postlude. She invites you to rest a bit and enjoy it before we move briefly into the fellowship hall before our annual meeting.